Okay, so the first thing that we need to do when we talk about polynomials is we need to talk about what a polynomial is. So that's what this video is going to be about. First, we are going to define a polynomial of degree n. The degree is always the highest exponent in the polynomial, all right? And it's always going to be in this form: a number and then a variable, plus a number and then a variable, plus a number and then a variable. The numbers a sub n minus 1, a sub n minus 2 are called the coefficients. Okay, the number a sub 0 out here at the end, this guy is called the constant of the polynomial. All right, and that number a sub n, the one in front, is a special coefficient, and he is called the leading coefficient. The leading coefficient always goes with the term that has the degree. All right. It's easier to deal with this when you're looking at an actual example, so let's look at something that has numbers in it. In this polynomial, the leading coefficient is the number 3. The degree is the highest exponent, which is the number 5. All right. The coefficients are the numbers in front of the variables. So 3, 6, -2, 7, and -6 are all described as coefficients. You'll note that they also have 1 as a coefficient that comes from this 1 that's right there. Typically, they won't write a 1. If the coefficient is 1, you don't need the 1 written there, but that's what it is. And then the constant term at the end is the number that has no variable with it. So that's 6. I'm sorry, -6. All right. Sometimes it's easier to talk about what a polynomial is if you talk about what it isn't. What does it not contain? So the first thing that a polynomial does not contain is negative exponents. If you see a negative exponent, you know that you are not dealing with a polynomial. Okay. So something like 2x to the -3, not a polynomial. All right. The second thing that it does not contain is a variable in the bottom of a fraction. So a variable in the denominator. So if you see 3 over x, that is not a polynomial. That won't work, okay, because you have an x in the denominator. But be careful, because if the fraction that you see is made of all numbers, there's no variable in the denominator. So like 2/3 x squared, because that x is not in the denominator, that is a polynomial. If the only thing in the denominator of the fraction is a number, then that's okay. All right, so this one does not work, but this one does. And the third thing that a polynomial does not contain is a variable inside a square root. All right. So for example, if I have a radical and I have 3x, that is not a polynomial because I have the variable inside the square root. So anytime you see a square root, you know you're not dealing with a polynomial. No good. All right. Let's look at a few examples. We want to decide, is something a polynomial or not? This first one, there's no negative exponents, there's no variables in the denominator, and there are no square roots. So this is a polynomial. We would say the degree of this polynomial is the largest coefficient, which is 3. The leading coefficient is the number in front of the variable with the degree. So the leading coefficient in this case is 4. And the constant term, I'm just going to abbreviate that. Well, I'll abbreviate it, CON. The constant term is 2. Okay. For B, because that x is in the denominator there, you have an x right here, that is not a polynomial. Doesn't work. Similarly here, this x is in the denominator. Because the x is in the denominator, that is not a polynomial. For D, we have no negative exponents, we have no variables in the denominator, and no square roots. So this is a polynomial. The degree of this polynomial is 6. The leading coefficient is 5, which is the coefficient in front of the variable with the degree. And the constant here is a little tricky because all of these coefficients that you see are attached to x's. The constant is this secret plus 0 at the end. If there is no plane number, that plane number we write as 0. All right, so this has a constant of 0. E has no variables in the denominator, has no negative exponents, and no square roots, so it is a polynomial. Decimals are allowed, so that's no problem. The degree of this is a little tricky because I don't see any exponents, but if I have x with no exponent, I can create an exponent of 1. All right, so this could also be read as 2.71 x to the first plus 8. And so the degree of this is 1. The leading coefficient, whoops, we'll just abbreviate it, is that 2.71, no problem with the decimal, and then the constant is 8. This last case, case F, is a special case polynomial. This is called a constant polynomial. All right, the degree of this is actually 0. You see no x's. All right, remember that anything raised to the power of 0, oops, let me write it, there we go. Anything raised to the power of 0 is equal to 1. So if I say 4x to the 0, I could also call that 4 times 1. All right, so this is a degree of 0. The leading coefficient is 4, and the constant term is also 4. All right, so a 0-degree polynomial is a special case, and we will talk more about that in a future lesson.